Hi there, grade 5s. Welcome back to your natural science lesson. Hope you're all well. I hope you are still at home, still healthy and still safe. I don't know about you, I'm getting a little bit fed up of being indoors, but at least every day I get to come online and give you your lessons, so it gives me a lovely thing to do. Let's get cracking. Right. For natural science today, we are going to continue with our study on life cycles. Yesterday, you looked for me at the life cycle of a flowering plant. Now, I wonder if you can remember the 5 distinct stages of the life cycle of a flowering plant. Take a second to think about it and see if you can remember all the 5 stages. Right, well, let's see if you got those right. So, a flowering plant we learned yesterday has 5 stages. Germination is the first, where a seed starts to grow underground in the most suitable conditions. Remember, those conditions there needs to be moisture, there needs to be water available, it needs to be warm, and there needs to be soil, okay? So that it will germinate. And you can see here, it's starting to sprout there, a little root, that's the germination occurring. Then the second stage is that one root will start to spread out and grow to anchor the plant underground, and then slowly but surely a stem will pop up above ground and we will have now what we call a seedling. The stem and the leaves form, and those are very important because the roots now have it anchored and bring up water and nutrients, but the stem and the leaves are green and those are needed to make food for the plant through photosynthesis. Then, once it's big enough, the plant will produce flowers, and those flowers make new seeds. And then lastly, the seeds are spread so that they can grow far enough away from the parent plant and don't need to compete for space or sunlight or soil. Now, that stage, remember, is called seed dispersal, and it can happen in lots of different ways. Animals can disperse seeds either by eating fruit and vegetables that come from the plants and then pooping out what's left. Animals can also walk past plants and brush up against them and get seeds stuck to them. The wind can blow seeds away. There's lots of different, even some plants rely on water, such as coconuts. Coconuts actually float. And if you've ever wondered how, you see these desert islands with a couple of coconut trees on them. Well, it's because that coconut has probably traveled over the ocean until it's been washed up on another beach, on another island. So, plants, those are the 5 stages. And if you have, as I said yesterday, any beans lurking around in your cupboard or tomatoes in your fridge and you could squeeze out the seeds of a tomato, why not try and give it a go in the next couple of weeks and grow your own little plant? So now that we have recapped our understanding of the life cycle of a flowering plant, let's look at what we're going to learn today. So today we are going to describe the life cycles of different animals from different classes of animals. I'm going right the way back to the things that we did few weeks ago now, where we looked at mammals and vertebrates and invertebrates and etc. And we are also going to identify the similarities and differences certain species life cycles have. So the vocabulary that I want you to take note of today for that scientific dictionary: gestation, embryo, and metamorphosis. We will be using those words in today's lesson. So let's start by thinking about what we already know. So here I'm going to put up on the screen for you 4 different classes of animals: mammals, amphibians, insects. Remember, insects would come under the arthropod family of invertebrates. And if you've forgotten all that, you can actually go back and watch that lesson again. And birds. And we're going to look at those animals' life cycles in today's lesson. So before we get going with the life cycles, take a minute and see if you can list on a piece of paper somewhere the things that you already know about those particular classes of animals. I'm going to pause the video. So take a second to pause your video and do that for me. Okay, I hope you did that and you hit pause and you made those quick little jottings. So let's see if you can remember. So what about mammals? So there we go. A mammal is a warm-blooded animal. It's a vertebrate, remember, has a backbone, and it gives birth to live young. Mammals have either fur or hair covering their bodies, no matter where they are. Remember, even whales under the water have a fine layer of hair. The largest mammal in the world is the blue whale, and the smallest is the bumblebee bat. If you'd like to have a little look at the bumblebee bat after this lesson, have a little Google and see if you can find them. They're very, very cute. Okay, so those are some things I know about mammals. You may have written down other things. Hopefully you've told me that the mammal that doesn't give birth to live young was the duck-billed platypus. We talked about that in a previous lesson. You may have said that all mammals have lungs and breathe air, that they nurture their young and feed their babies milk. There's lots of things we have learnt about mammals. What about amphibians? Here's my little blue frog. Let's click on him. Amphibians, remember they are cold-blooded creatures. They are still vertebrates though, they have a backbone. They live near bodies of water, and some examples of amphibians are frogs and toads. I hope you have remembered one of my fun facts about the word amphibian, meaning of both worlds, which so tells you that amphibians are creatures that are born in water and grow up and come out onto dry land. Let's now go on to the next two. So we had insects. Now, when we looked at insects, we actually looked at the whole arthropod family. Remember, arthropods involve insects, arachnids, and crustaceans. So if you don't know some of these facts, that's okay. So let's learn some things about insects. An insect is an invertebrate, remember, no backbone. Its body is split into 3 sections, a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. They have exoskeletons. We did that when we looked at skeletons. Remember the 3 types, exo, endo, and hydrostatic. So insects have exoskeletons, and there are actually about 1 million species of insects in our world. Known, that is. Remember, they're still discovering new things every day. Ants, bees, butterflies, you name it, they all come under the insect family. And last but by no means least, let's look at birds. Remember, facts about birds. Birds are vertebrates. They have beaks, feathers and wings. Remember that all birds have feathers, but not all birds can fly. Owls, swans and sparrows are all species of birds, but so are hawks, eagles. Again, there's hundreds, so there's lots you could have written there. Okay, so now that we've done a quick recap of that, life cycles. Now, I am going to put a timer on the screen for you, and I'm going to give you 1 minute. And I would like you in 1 minute to draw a life cycle of any creature, including as much detail as you possibly can. So you could draw the life cycle of a bird, of a mammal, of an amphibian, or an insect, whatever you can think of. So you've got 1 minute, go. Okay, now stop and put your pencils down. Now, usually I would have said pause the video, but I wanted you to actually take the proper 1 minute. and see if you could do it. So well done if you did. Now, keep that drawing with you, and as we go through the life cycles of those various creatures now, I want you, when your one pops up, to hold your sheet in front of you and see how much of it you got correct. Okay, so let's start with our mammals. Now, you could have chosen any mammal when you were doing your 1 minute quick question of a life cycle. I've chosen to do a dog, but if you've chosen a human, a cat, or even a whale, it doesn't matter, because generally the life cycle stays the same. So let's have a little look at them. Stage number 1 in the life cycle of a mammal is gestation. Hopefully you remember that word. We had it on our vocabulary list for today. Gestation is the period in a life cycle of a mammal when an embryo grows inside a mother. It is completely reliant on its mother and is not yet out in the world. So every mammal, because they give birth to live young, have a period of gestation where the mother carries the baby and is part of the mother's body during that time. Okay, stage 2, oh, look at that cute little face, is the young. Okay, so this is the main period of growth and development. But now, this stage, they're independent from their parents, so they're not part of the parent's body, but still depend a lot on their parents for survival, okay? So, you know, and it takes different periods of time in different mammals. You know, some are very quick, you know, and others take a lot longer. I think most grown-ups would probably agree that humans, we're not fully out of the being dependent on your parents until you're well over about the age of 18. Okay, and then obviously lastly we have adulthood. Now this is when you're fully independent. This is where you, at the stage in a mammal's life, they would seek company from a mate and mate in order to reproduce. Adults, remember, in mammals, the adult female nurses their young. Now that doesn't mean nurse as in a doctor and nurse. A nurse as in feeds their baby young, their young milk. Okay, so just to summarize, those are the 3 main stages of the life cycle of every mammal. We go from embryo to young to adulthood. Now, the amphibian. The amphibian's life cycle is very complex and very interesting. The first stage is when there is a mass of eggs laid by a female and fertilized by a male. Now remember, with amphibians, this often happens underwater. After about anywhere between 2 to 25 days, tadpoles hatch from those eggs. And remember, those tadpoles look very, very similar to little tiny fish, and they live underwater. Those tadpoles swim and they eat plants and they have gills. So this is where that both worlds come in. Slowly those tadpoles will grow fins and a stronger tail, and then develop hind legs and lungs. Now this is the very important thing, because those lungs will allow them now to start to come out of the water. The tadpole then will grow front legs, its tail starts to shorten, and it uses the nutrients that it had in its tail as food in order for it to completely change, and so it can jump out of the water and onto land, and now we have a fully grown adult amphibian. Now the tail has totally disappeared, it starts to eat insects instead of plants, and it can take up to about 2 to 4 years to become an adult, when it then will lay its own eggs and the cycle starts again. So that's the one of amphibians. If you are lucky enough to have a pond in your garden or nearby, you may even be able to see some tadpoles and watch them change and grow. But leave them be, especially if you live in an area such as myself, where there are amphibians that are endangered, such as the Western Cape leopard toad. Please, please, please don't touch them, leave them be, and let them get on with their lives in safety. So just as a reminder, here is a very quick picture to show you those stages. So we first of all have the eggs that are fertilized then by the male. We have the baby tadpoles coming out and living on plants. Those tadpoles then grow a tail and hind legs. that tail starts to shrink away, and then the front legs grow and lungs develop. And then finally, the toad will hop out onto land and have lungs and start eating flies and insects. So there you go. Now, well done if you got that, if you drew that in your 1 minute challenge today. If you didn't, it's a very, very good picture to pause the video now and maybe copy that down into your books. So now we're going to move on to our insects, the only invertebrates that we're looking at today. And the life cycle of insects is very interesting because it can be one of two things. Some insects do what we call a complete metamorphosis. And we'll look at that word now. Remember, that was the other one that was included in our vocab list for today. Whereas other insects have what we call an incomplete metamorphosis. So if I click on complete, it should tell us that. Right, a complete metamorphosis. The life cycle of these insects has 4 stages: eggs, larva, pupa, and adult. Okay, and those would include insects such as beetles, butterflies, and flies. The word metamorphosis here means change. If something metamorphosizes, it changes completely. So a complete metamorphosis, a egg and larva and pupa stage of a butterfly look absolutely nothing like the end adult. They have completely changed. An incomplete metamorphosis, some insects have 3 stages. They go from egg to nymph to adult. And those are insects such as grasshoppers, crickets, and cockroaches. Okay, so here there is a change, but it's not a complete change. Okay, the young look very similar to the adult version. So let's have a little look at that in a little bit more detail. So this is a complete metamorphosis. I've chosen a butterfly to show you here. So the first stage are the eggs. Eggs being laid by the female insect. Those then hatch into larvae, and depending on the species, obviously. For a butterfly, obviously it comes in the form of caterpillars, but some insects, like flies, for example, they hatch into maggots. You can have grubs. I know they're very, gives me the chills, you know, that feeling at the back of your neck. But anyway, that's what happens. Then the third stage, this is the pupa stage. This is when usually a hard case is formed around the larva. Okay, so in the form of a caterpillar, we would say it's got a chrysalis. Okay, and you may have seen these on certain plants. You may be lucky enough to see chrysalises, I think that might be the plural, or chrysali, I'm not sure, hanging. Then the final one is when the metamorphosis occurs. We have now an adult which breaks out of that chrysalis, out of the pupa, and matures in order to lay its own eggs, and so the life cycle begins again. So that was a complete metamorphosis, and then I said the other way insects can have a life cycle is an incomplete one. So here's an example of an incomplete one. This one's a dragonfly. So here, eggs hatch just the same as the complete metamorphosis, but they hatch into something we call a nymph. Now, a nymph, obviously it depends on the species, but nymphs are basically tiny, tiny versions of the adults, okay? They can sometimes live in water, whereas the adults live on land, but they do look like miniature versions. Now, I've been lucky enough in my garden, I often find praying mantis nymphs, and they are absolutely tiny, but they're perfect replicas of the adult. So that's what a nymph. Then the second stage, this nymph then grows into an adult. Now remember, when we looked at the types of skeletons, I told you that many creatures with exoskeletons, and insects included them, one of the downsides is that their skeletons don't grow with them. Ours grow with us. As we grow, so do our skeletons. Whereas in exoskeletons, they have to shed them. Just like they shed their skin, they can sometimes shed their skeletons as well. Some adults fly, and the adult females lay eggs. And the third stage is that the eggs are laid by the female insect, but that can sometimes happen in water. So that's the 3 stages with an incomplete. So eggs hatch into nymph, the nymph grows to adult, the adult lays the eggs again. Okay, so complete 4 stages, incomplete 3 stages. And if any of you are busy trying to write down or draw this out, then I've got an image for you here that you can again pause your video or rewind me later. I was actually thinking this the other day, wouldn't you always love to be able to hit rewind on one of your teachers in class if you've missed something? Well, now you can. So here's a complete metamorphosis. This one's obviously a ladybird, and here's an incomplete metamorphosis of a dragonfly. So make sure you've got those down and you've labelled them at their individual stages, and make sure you get those names correct. You may even want to add them to your dictionary. Now, our final animal for today is going to be the bird. So the bird comes into 3 stages. So the first stage are the eggs. The eggs are laid by the mother and father the eggs are laid by the mother and father, care for the eggs until they hatch. They generally take turns. I don't know if you know this interesting fact, but the ostrich is obviously one of the largest birds and native to South Africa. But I always wondered why the male ostrich was black with black and white feathers and the female was brown, speckled almost. And then a friend who's a game ranger told me that that's because the mother ostrich takes its turn to sit on the egg during the day, and the brown speckles blend her in with the savanna during the day, or the bush during the day, and the father takes its turn at night time, and that's why it's got black feathers so that it blends in with the darkness. So there you go. Next time you want to impress someone with your knowledge of the natural world, you can tell them why the ostriches are different colours depending on their gender. Right, now the second stage, we've had the eggs being laid and cared for by the parents. Now we have the chick. So the mother and father feed the chick, the young bird, until it is old enough to fly and find its own food. But remember, that's a generalization. Here I've got the chicken, and who can't really fly very far, to be honest. Remember, some birds do not fly at all, okay? Then finally, we have the adult who is independent, seeks a mate, just as it would with in any species from the opposite sex, and then it can lay its own eggs and the cycle begins again. So to end off today, I thought we'd do 2 little very quick activities. The first I want you to do is have a look at this table I've drawn. I have mammal, amphibian, insects who have a complete metamorphosis, insects that have an incomplete metamorphosis, and birds. And I have given you things to compare them with. So starts as an egg will all do except for the mammal. The number of stages in the life cycle have been written. So mammals have 3, amphibians 6. The complete metamorphosis 4, the incomplete 3, and birds have 3. And does the young look like the adult? Well, yes, for mammals, although obviously they can look a little bit different. You know, some mammals obviously are born without hair and they grow hair, or fur, but generally they are replicas of their parents. Amphibians, no, they do not look like the adults. Remember, they go through their own form of metamorphosis. Complete metamorphosis, no. Incomplete, yes, they hatch as nymphs and they look like little versions of their parents. And birds, yes, okay, again, can look very different. Some birds are born without feathers and they develop them, but they do look like their parents. Okay, and here is my very own young. This is my daughter Kira. Can you wave and say hello, everybody?
Hi.
Oh, and here comes my dog as well. But Kira, this is her room that we've taken over to do our lessons in, so we can say a big thank you to her, and you can hear our sister screaming in the background as well. Hey? What's going on, Ava? Is lunch ready? Num nums. It's time for lunch. So you go off and have some lunch. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Well, there's her little guest appearance. She's always been wondering who I've been talking to in her room. So thank you so much. So now back to the table. I've done this for you for the animals that I have shown you thus far. My challenge for you would be, I have got here obviously 3 classes of vertebrates, and you should know that there are 5, and I'm missing 2 from this table, those being reptiles and fish. And I would challenge you to draw this table out into your books and see if you can add in the ticks, the number, and the yes and no for those 2 classes of animals. So see if you can do it, and if you can, don't forget, send them through. Show me your work in your natural science. I'd love to see it. Our email address, remember, is at the beginning of every show. It is grade5@worksheetcloud.com. But now let's compare, just to end our lesson today, the life cycles of mammals and birds in a little bit more detail. So I have got on the screen for you 2 columns. One says similarities and one says differences. And I'd like you to see how many things you can note that are similar between the life cycle of a bird and a mammal, and how many things are different. Take a time now to pause the video, and when you unpause, I'll have some answers for you. Okay, so here we go. Some similarities. Well, both birds and mammals have 3 main stages in their life cycle. We saw that in the table previously. The first stage is where embryos form and grow. Now, although obviously in a bird, that embryo is in an egg, and in a mammal, it is within the mother, it's still an embryo. The second stage is where the young is supported by its parents. So both mammals and birds nurture their young, until they are independent and can stand on their own 2 feet. And the third stage is adults, where reproduction takes place. So there are the similarities. If we come over here and look at the differences, mammals give birth to live young, except for that duck-billed platypus, whereas birds lay eggs. Mammals usually are nursed by their mother. Remember that nursed means given milk that the mother has produced, whereas young birds are usually fed by both parents, by both the male and the female. Okay, so you can now take this and do that to compare to other animals in the table if you wish to do so. Okay, so that concludes our lesson on life cycles of animals today. So yesterday we looked at plants, today we've looked at animals. And you know what? I think we are almost done and wrapping up our section of study on life and living. We have worked so hard, so well done grade 5s. I'm very, very, very proud of you. I have put some activities for you on WorksheetCloud.com. Underneath my video, you'll see them, as well as the memo so you can mark it. But don't forget, you can always extend what you do by completing that scientific dictionary for me. Well, not completing it, I don't think it'll ever be complete, but building it, should I say, and by also doing drawing your life cycles out and doing that activity on the table for me, where you add in reptiles and you add in fish. Okay, have a lovely day further, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.